This morning, we are discussing the startling statistics that reveal 70% of adults are exposed to at least one traumatic event within their lifetime. This is an epidemic that remains largely misunderstood.
This morning, we're learning how to raise awareness for those affected by trauma and how we as a community can navigate it together. We are joined this morning by psychotherapist Dr. Toni Warner for more today. Thank you so much for waking up with us. Really appreciate your time.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
So I have to ask, the statistics are rather alarming. How is it that so many people are impacted by trauma?
You know, I don't think we can answer that question with a very clear-cut response as to how so many people are affected by trauma. But what I can say is that we are a social species. We are wired for connection. It is a basic need, period. As a human species, we need to feel connected with one another. And what happens is when we have trauma in, whether it's in our family or whether it's something we're experiencing because of our systems that have been created, when we have these traumas, it feels unsafe to connect. It feels unsafe, right? And if we're feeling unsafe in being able to connect, especially with loved ones throughout childhood, then we are going to experience trauma. That being said, trauma is experienced differently by different people. So what might feel traumatizing to me and have an effect on my brain and body may not feel traumatizing to you or have the same effect on your brain and body. So we also want to be careful about saying that trauma has to be like a specific event or a specific experience, because it's far more complex than that.
Really fascinating.
Doc, can you kind of explain like examples of trauma though? Because, you know, I feel like people might be thinking, oh, that was just whatever, a bad time, that was a bad experience, and maybe shoving those emotions or experiences down.
I'm so glad you asked that question, because I think that that is one of the most misunderstood areas, kind of in layman's terms. Like, that is one of the areas where people are like, oh, that's not trauma. That doesn't apply. Like, it could have been worse. And listen, everyone's experience is subjective, so that might be true for them, but that, again, may not be true for someone else. So a lot of people think of trauma as really severe bodily abuse. So we think of physical abuse, abuse during childhood, severe neglect, sexual abuse, war, being a veteran and being involved in war, single incident trauma, like being in a car accident. And those all do absolutely qualify as traumas and can feel very traumatizing for an individual, of course. But those are not the only things that qualify as trauma, and those are not the only things that our body, our brain and body encode as traumatizing experiences. There are two other ones that I want to highlight today. And of course, this is a generalization and simplification because we have a short period of time together today. But the two others are relational trauma and systemic trauma. Now, these two far and wide are not discussed in mainstream or not understood in mainstream. Okay, so relational trauma is what we think about when we're growing up in childhood. As children, we have that basic need of connection, right? And we're looking to our primary caregivers for that. So if there is a lack of feeling emotionally or physically safe with our caregivers, if that's happening on a chronic basis or an unreliable basis, then that can be registered as trauma because the system that we need to connect to feel safe isn't reliable or is chronically not there. That's a threat to our survival. It's encoded as a threat, right, to our survival. That can be experienced as a traumatic experience. And that walks into my office all the time. I see that in my psychotherapy office all the time. All right. And it could be also being in a family and then only being recognized for achieving, for when I'm only seen, I'm only feeling wanted or loved or connected when I'm achieving something.
Doc,
So now,
I don't mean to cut you off. We're running low on time, and I do want to just get to a kind of a resolution maybe to this. Once, with about 30 seconds left, once you realize what it is, how do you then address it?
Okay, so a couple of things, and I know we're short on time. So one, we want to reduce the stigma simply by doing what you all are doing now. We're having the conversation, right? That's reducing the stigma in and of itself. We're increasing that awareness. So let's share conversations like this with others. To educate yourself on the common signs and symptoms of trauma, because it is more than just simple traumas that people think of off the top of their head. It goes beyond that. And if we can educate ourselves, now we can become more trauma informed. You can also explore what's going on within yourself. You could grab my book, The Reset, on Amazon. That will help get some self-exploration in. And also seek and share about qualified support, which goes beyond just talking. All right, so therapies that include the brain and the body. Brain spotting, for example, is a really good one that I'm also certified in, and one that I highly recommend for folks that are really ready to do that deeper brain and body work.
Doc, thank you so much for chatting with us this morning and for sharing that helpful advice and just kind of opening our eyes to it. We certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll be calling for an appointment later today, my friend. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. We'll post all of this information online, Fox Rochester.